Okay, let's start. So hello everyone. Welcome to the next meetup organized jointly by quantum computing groups from Washington, Warsaw, and Toronto. Today, we have a pleasure to host a great speaker, Bamborde Balde, co-founder of Zajac Group, and he will give a talk exposing abstract mathematical structures to aspiring quantum pros. My name is Pawel. I will be a moderator of this meetup. So this meetup will be recorded, and the recording, the video will be available on our YouTube channel as usually, hopefully. If you have any questions during the talk, please post your questions on our chat or on the live chat on YouTube, and we'll ask our speaker during the Q&A session at the end, or if there are some important urgent questions, we will also try to interrupt. So feel free to post your questions during the talk. Before we start, we'd also like to announce our next meetups. So on 5th of June, Dr. Samuel Chen will give a talk, Introduction to Hybrid Quantum Classical Machine Learning with Applications. Then on 25th of June, Professor Barry Bird will give a talk, Timing Infinity of Quantum Measurements. Then in July, we'll have two speakers from Classic Technologies, and they will give a talk about optimized and hardware-aware solutions to quantum problems, why they are important and how to create them. And in August, the speaker will be Abhinandan Pal, and he will give a talk about Quivi, a quantum programming language. And we'd also like to thank our sponsors and all the partners: Quantum AI Foundation, Association Quantum, Orion XNet, artisticqb.net, QPoland, Cambridge Quantum, and Quantum Computing India. So all these partners, all these groups, initiatives support organization of this meetup. And yeah, I think that's all from my side. So Bamborde, thanks for accepting our invitation. It's our pleasure to have you here. And if you are ready, we can start. I will now stop sharing my slides. And the Zoom is yours. Bamborde, you are still muted now. Could you please unmute yourself?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I muted myself before.
That's fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Okay, so let's see. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes, I can see your slides. Okay,
so yeah, so thank you so much, Pawel, Helen, and the team for inviting me to share some stuff about our community with you. And it's really great to be here with you. And I actually attend a lot of your events. I think what you guys are doing is really great for the community, inviting different guests, from different community to come in and share their insights and experiences. This is all good in order for this industry at these early stages to really move forward. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk. So to the rest, I'm Bamborde. I'm a co-founder of the Zajac Group and the head of mathematical sciences. So at Zajac, we are essentially, in a nutshell, an R&D company focusing on exploiting the boundaries between advanced branches of mathematics and emerging stuff like quantum computation is one of them, machine learning, in particular, an emerging branch of machine learning called geometric deep learning. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of the stuff about our quantum formalism community with you. Let's see. So I have split this in two parts. So the main session will be mostly about this the quantumformalism.com initiative, and then we'll have, at the end of it, we'll have Q&As. But please feel free to interrupt if you have any urgent question in respect to what you see, in respect to the content as I go through with the content. If you have anything off topic, I would rather prefer that you wait until the Q&A, or in the second part, where we will have some sort of a panel discussion. Hopefully some of the community members will be here. Unfortunately, not all could make it because of the timing, but I hope some of them will be able to join in and share their experiences of going through this, being part of the community with you, and maybe you can learn something. So that's the agenda. But before we go through this, the first thing I would like to ask is why abstraction? So I found this very interesting, this page. You can go there, this Wikipedia page that actually sums it up nicely, why you should embrace yourself for mathematical abstraction. Okay, you can visit it. I won't go through it, but what I want to say is bring it into the context of quantum mechanics in this case. Some of you physicists, please correct me if there is anything from a historical point of view. If there is anything off, please correct me. But my understanding is that in the early days of quantum mechanics, there were two versions of the theory. One, which is the Schrödinger approach, the so-called wave mechanics. This approach essentially emphasized the notion of wave function, which encoded the notion of a state. At the time, very interestingly, the Schrödinger, he probably didn't know, I'm not sure whether he was aware of it, but he was using it. The space of the wave functions is actually these two, this space L2 of R3. You can also generalize this to L2 of Rn, depending on how many dimensions you are considering. So this is essentially mathematics. If you study functional analysis and measure theory, you will see that this is a space of square integrable functions. Integrable in the sense of Lebesgue. You don't need to know this. This is just a brief historical note. If you want to learn more about this, you should definitely join our community, quantumformulist.com, because we will have a course on measure theory and functional analysis at some point. So that's the Schrödinger picture. The other picture, computing theory, was the Heisenberg matrix mechanics. In this, I believe the emphasis was on observables, and I believe it lacked the notion of state, I think. I'm not sure. Maybe I got it. Physicists, please correct me. So anyway, the observables were encoded in what he called matrices. These are essentially built on this space L2 or small L2 of n. In mathematical jargon, this is the space of square summable sequences. Again, if you do functional analysis, you will know what this means. Don't worry about it. The key to note is that, so we have these two competing theories, but then thanks to abstraction, and I believe that was von Neumann. I believe there were also other people involved, like Jordan, probably Dirac. I'm not sure. Physicists, again, please correct me on the thing, on the historical context. Anyway, von Neumann, he's the one, I believe, that came up with this notion of Hilbert space, realizing obviously these two spaces, the one that Schrödinger was using, and the space that Heisenberg was using, actually they are both complex Hilbert spaces. Okay, so I believe then the proposal was that you could have this unified abstract framework where you can encode the observables. So for those of you, the 10 physicists, you can correct me. Observables are the things that physicists can measure, right? So things like position, momentum, this type of stuff, energy. Okay, so these in the framework are encoded as what we call, mathematicians call, self-adjoint operators on a Hilbert space. Okay. And then so you have the observables. So the notion of state then becomes the elements of the vectors, if you wanted to be more precise, rays on a Hilbert space. But that doesn't matter. And the very interesting to note is that these two spaces are actually what mathematicians say unitarily equivalent. This is another way to say they are they are the same thing. They look different, but from a structural point of view, they are the same thing. So it's just a matter of choice, of preference, whether you use one or the other. Okay. And another thing, just a subtle note for those of you, these actually have these are infinite dimensional Hilbert spaces. Okay, so the dimension of this is infinite. Most of you, especially those taking introductory courses to quantum computing, you come across the space Cn, which is a finite dimensional Hilbert space, but physicists, a lot of times, they actually deal with the infinite dimensional Hilbert spaces, when you are modeling complicated systems, say, for example, the harmonic oscillator, these things, this type of stuff, okay? So that's one thing of motivation for abstraction. You see how two theories that were like seen as competing, and thanks to abstraction, they were unified. And then it's like a matter of choice, depending on your problem, right? Some problems, maybe the Heisenberg picture is better, then you use the corresponding mathematics to go and model your system and do whatever you want to extract out of it. Okay, so this goes back, let's go back about, move on about this community, quantum formalism. Yeah.
Can you elaborate what is unitarily equivalent?
Okay, we do not have the language to do that. You need functional analysis. This is the best I can say is that if you had some sort of exposure to vector spaces, for instance, two vector spaces are isomorphic. If they have the same, you have like isomorphism between them, right? One to one, they essentially have the same. You can essentially get from one, you can get another. So they are the same thing. They are from classification point of view. There's no distinction between them. Yeah, it might be distinct in your eyes. Or
Unitarily.
Unitarily, this is more sophisticated. Unitarily, this is a jargon because Hilbert spaces, they're not just algebraic structures. You see, they have geometry, they have topological structure, and this is a way of adding this into that. So we don't just say isomorphic. We need to take into account the unitary structure. It doesn't matter. We will not be able to do that. You need to have functional analysis in order to understand this. It doesn't matter. So.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so quantum formalism is essentially a free online course series provided by my company, Zajac Group. It's essentially aimed at exposing advanced mathematical topics to a diverse group of STEM professionals looking to break into the into the national quantum computing industry. By diverse, I don't just mean like ethnic and gender diverse. One of the biggest misconceptions that I think exist nowadays is to think that this field, this emerging field, is only for young people. I actually think we can gain a lot from like experience in the older professionals, even retired professionals, because these things is like this thing is like very new and it requires some sort of maturity in order to gauge it, to be able to have any chance of doing any sort of non-trivial contribution. The abstractions are not built there for just an 18 years old to go there and start playing around with the high-level stuff, and then produce something, So it requires some maturity. Certainly, it requires mathematical maturity, right? So this is exactly one of the things that we want to do. We saw there was a gap in our view, and we wanted to add value by trying to offer this. In particular, there are two target two personas, two type of people that are ideal for this. The first one is people coming from other STEM backgrounds, whether in physics or computer science, any other STEM background, and they want to come into quantum computing and aspire to become potentially come into the field as professionals. They have gone through the introductory courses to linear algebra stuff, the kindergarten stuff, all these matrices and so on. But to go to the next level, if they want to be really like aspire to really do non-trivial stuff, this is where their mathematical sophistication need to be higher. right? They need to be able to understand, for example, the mathematical structures underpinning the thing at the gate level, for instance. For example, understand what a unitary group is, or as a matter of fact, what a Lie group is, for instance. So that's one target audience for us. The second one is existing QC pros. They might come from different background. They're already in the industry, but they still have the need to pick up some of the abstract mathematical structures because they feel this adds value to their skill set. So these are the main target audience. So essentially, we want people who aspire to do something, to contribute something, whether on their own or whether with joining the company. So we are not targeting. Our main target is not like to anybody, but to these two. This is not to say that everyone else is not welcome. So for other stuff like the business of quantum computing and all this stuff, there are already other community, other initiatives that do that properly. Okay, so we're not here to think. We are mostly focused on technical people. That's what I want to say. Another thing is the prerequisite. The prerequisite, because this thing requires a little bit of abstraction tolerance, if you will. The ideal, this is not like a must, but the ideal is really for people to have some sort of university level exposure to mathematics. Say, for example, they have gone through calculus or applied linear algebra. Here I'm using applied linear algebra to distinguish the linear algebra that mathematicians learn, which is a little bit more abstract. In linear algebra taught to engineering, people coming from engineering background, they focus more on the computational aspect, define matrices, know how to compute this, compute that. Whereas in linear algebra, mathematician style, it's focused a little bit more on the structural side and classification and all this stuff. So that's the ideal. This doesn't mean that people who are coming from high school or or other background cannot, but it will become like I think, in my view, you can actually ask the community member later in the panel. I think it will become an uphill battle if you do not have university level exposure. This is simply because a lot of it makes it very easy, because a lot of the abstract notions that they are going to be exposed to, they already, without knowing, they were already dealing with it. For example, they already know how to multiply and deal with matrices. They know the property of matrices, but they might not know that underpinning that there is a structure called a ring, for instance, or even a C-star algebra. This is just an example, for instance. So that's why. Okay. So the same also with the calculus. There might be knowing to do differentiate. To do differentiation and these things. If you learn differential geometry and these things, you just certainly will come across differentiable structures and these things. If you don't know calculus, you don't know what that means. It becomes a little bit of a uphill battle. Yeah. So this is a sweet spot of ideal prerequisite of people who are being exposed to university level mathematics, because it's much easier for them to grasp the abstractions that we are trying to expose them to. So our course format, since we started in 2020, I'll share a bit in the thing. There's another slide about the timeline. So we do bi-weekly lectures. Normally they are held on Fridays, and they last between 45 to 60 minutes per session. And they are normally held at 5 p.m. British summer time, which I believe converted to the other times is this. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, so we keep it very short because, not just the list, we have not just myself, but people attending have limited time. These are a lot of the people attending in the community are work or study and do other stuff. And also it's, I found it easier to break things in small, instead of, giving a huge dose of abstraction to people, do it in small chunks. So this has been the strategy for us. By keeping it also like this short, it means that it will take longer to go through things, But at the same time, the upside of it is that it gives people the chance, to digest, to learn, So that's what the approach that we've been taking. And then after the live lectures, we have like question and answers, and sometimes it evolves to discussion. And then what we do is this thing has evolved to having like study groups on Fridays. So we have a Discord channel where people normally go together. Some of them will probably share about that. I hope George, for example, is here, I believe. So this essentially one of the things that I motivate is for people to kind of interact with each other, share, correct each other, and go through the problem sets together, because that way the learning experience is a little bit more less intimidating for them, by seeing other people make mistakes, and by also like understanding how other people are tackling a certain problem, and it also makes it a little bit more friendly in a way, to enable the community to have some sort of a natural peer-to-peer learning experience amongst themselves. Yeah, so I tend to be lazy in a way. I'm there in the problems. If they cannot solve the problems, I then step in. But the first step is for them to try to solve the problems themselves. If they cannot, they have any doubts, they have to ask a community member. So I'm the last resort. They come to me, then I will do it, because this is the best way to get these things into people's head. Yeah. So if it's just coming to take notes, this is probably not for you. If you just want to come, take notes, and you really have to work for it. Because at the end of the day, this is really, we want you to be equipped with the mathematical abstraction, so that you have the chance to go and do some contribution, something useful. In terms of the approach, I found it very useful to do this. So we start first with the abstraction. So we define the notions abstract as possible, and then we go through concreteness, concrete examples, this type of stuff, and then we give like the application side of the stuff, the abstract stuff that they learned. Okay, now a lot of people start the other way around. They start with concrete examples. You see the example and then you generalize and these things. I think actually, because the goal is really to learn to make people feel comfortable with the abstraction. In my view, the best way to start is actually to hit them with abstraction, as opposed to starting with the concrete examples and so on. So hit them with abstraction first, so they start to start. Abstraction becomes the first thing. It comes like I lost the word that I'm looking for, but it's an approach that I think you can actually ask the other guys. That I think it has been very useful to us, and I hope some of the guys will comment on this. One example, actually, there's a course that we are currently doing on group theory. We are currently in the sections about cyclic groups. Okay, so they already know about the abstract definition of a cyclic groups. Okay, we have seen concrete example of cyclic groups, and then the next step in the next lecture, for instance, what I will do is to see how cyclic groups are applied in cryptography, in the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol. So I really, for those of you who are educators, who are certainly interested in teaching abstracts to people, I think this approach is probably something that you should consider, or at least try and see. I mean, it might depend also on your thing, on your background. On the background of your audience, right? There
is one thing I like to add, which is a problem with mathematics in general, and I think it's missing in that circle as well, and that is the intuition. So, for example, when we talked about orthonormality, yes, of course, you can understand what orthonormality is in terms of you take two matrices and you
Yeah.
look at their, their conjugates, and, you see where the matrices are. But it does not define anything. What does it even mean? It has no, an abstraction. What does an abstraction do? Abstraction is basically a high levelization of a problem, right? Concreteness, yes, it's precise. Yes, it is application. But for an everyday individual, forever Joe, there's a disconnect between mathematics and how they perceive life in reality. And I think what is missing from that is the intuition. What does it actually mean? What does orthogonality mean? What is a wave function? What does it actually mean? And I think none of these guys over there, they do not cover that intuition, to understand the sense of the world. And I think if you could add that, that'd be just amazing, just as a feedback. Or if you have it, I don't know.
Yeah, well, this is actually, there's something here deep diving it into, the whole notion of pure mathematics, mathematics for the sake of it. Obviously these, people like Heisenberg, for example, how do they think they found out that, I think Heisenberg, in this case, he didn't even realize, physicists correct me, historians, he didn't even realize the mathematics of what he needed already existed. So he reinvented matrix multiplication, though his matrices, he called them like, infinite, infinite matrices. Yeah.
With regards to Heisenberg, right? Yeah. Heisenberg matrix conjugate is based on Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. And Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is very well defined. You can actually, you have an intuition about it. You can imagine it. You can actually close your eyes and visualize it. Yeah. And based on, you can. You can. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. If you can't,
I think for simple systems, for simple, I think hydrogen atoms and these things. But if you start considering very complicated systems,
no. You see, you don't have to go to complicated systems, because you got to start it somewhere, something very basic, which can form an intuition. Only then you can build on. You build the first layer, and you build the second layer on top of that. Now you see, but when in mathematics, the thing is that mathematics is beautiful. It's full of nice things, but without intuition, without any meaning attached to it, it has no meaning, because then they become symbols, right? Yeah. A language, when you and I are speaking on this, right? We have an emotion, a connect, and every word has a meaning. If I say something which is just a word, but you attach emotion, feelings to it, so it becomes part of your intuition.
Can we just proceed? Maybe this is something it's very interesting on the thing at the end as part of the panel discussion. I think it's very interesting point you are making. Though as a mathematician, you will ask first. I would ask you first. So what do you mean with intuition and these things? What do you mean with the? But we can come back to that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And short comment here. It's very difficult to teach intuition or imagination. Very difficult.
Yeah, but this is please keep this in the thing. We'll come back to this at the end. Yeah, we can even discuss about the philosophy between the formalist, and there is also the Platonist in the mathematician in the mathematical community. But it's very, very, very interesting. We are certainly, our focus is really on a thing on helping people deal with abstraction. That's the thing, and a lot of these things, it's very hard. How do you teach someone to think in 100 million dimensions, or to have an intuition of course you start in lower dimension, you can do that. But the problem with simple stuff, it's you can easily wrongly generalize. And in case, just before I move on, in the case of Heisenberg, for instance, the canonical commutation relation, you can actually see why he picked that particular Hilbert space, because it's infinite dimensional. The Heisenberg commutation relations only holds not in finite dimensional Hilbert spaces, but only in infinite dimensional Hilbert spaces. So the question is, how did he get that intuition to know that actually the thing, is I mean, this is a question for physicists. I certainly would like to have a physicist later on the panel to come in to give express their views. So let's just move on. Thank you for the input, for generating this point of discussion. We'll come back to it again. Okay, so since we started, by the way, can you see the slides? Is everything clear? Like the timeline stuff? I can see like the stuff is covered on my end. Can you see? Can you see the full slide?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, cool. So the green stuff is stuff that we completed since we started. We started in September during the lockdown. This was one of the motivations for me to convince my company to give me time and space to be able to start this. So we started with what we call, the first course was what we call the foundation module, which covered, it's, by the way, the playlist is available on YouTube. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you will see the playlist for all of this. So the foundation module was essentially like, we started with like basics of sets, we started with basics of groups, rings and fields, essentially the things that we needed in order to define the notion of a vector space over a field. And then we narrowed our focus to complex vector spaces, because this is what we need. Because quantum mechanics needs complex Hilbert spaces, and the complex Hilbert spaces are what we need. So in this case, we just strictly focus on finite dimensional Hilbert spaces, okay? And we also focused on, obviously on just the baseline stuff that we need. So we cover the operators, self-adjoint operators. Some of you might be saying, but it's Hermitian. This is, again, come to a functional analysis class, you will see a bit of a distinction between what's the self-adjoint operator and the Hermitian stuff. For finite dimensional stuff, it doesn't matter, but for infinite dimensional Hilbert spaces, there is a bit of a subtlety there to do with the boundedness of the operators. Anyway, it doesn't matter, okay? And then we went through matrix groups. We will do that again in here, but it was more of a quick overview, the unitary, the special unitary group. So people can see actually the operators, quantum operators, like the Pauli operators, for example, they do belong to a very rich structure. So people can see that. So that's why we cover this. And then we went through the basic postulates of quantum mechanics. That's it. Now, the second course, so that's the foundation module. So that's the entry point. That's the simplest way we could start. That's when we started in 2020. And then the second course, so the second course was basically motivated by something else, the upcoming course that I will share in a minute, which is Lie groups and the representation theory. So the second course was on topology and differential geometry. Why? Because Lie groups are not just algebraic structures. They do have topology. They do have geometric topological structure, so differentiable, smooth structure. So you need to know that in order to be able to really understand the essence of Lie groups. Okay. So we in this topology and differential geometry, we covered, we started again from very simple, point set topology, topological spaces, cover special type of topological spaces like the Hausdorff spaces. We went through the notion of a metric space. And the reason we do that, because, we need the notion of metric topology, because these are the topological space, this type of topological spaces, they are Hausdorff, that we need in order to take us to what we needed, which is the topological manifolds. And then we went through things like charts. We finally, we went through finally to differentiable structures on manifolds. We talk about diffeomorphisms, all this stuff that you need. We didn't cover fiber bundles and these things. We will cover that in the Lie group section, which will come after this current crash course, which is where we are at the moment. So this is a crash course on group theory. So we have this. So the topology and the differential geometry out of the way. Now is the algebraic stuff, to have a bit of, group theoretic notions. The way the actual group structure and the smooth structure coexist together, interact with each other. This is something that we will do in the Lie groups and the representation theory. So this is where we are. we started with the, again, very simple. Is rather than just jumping straight into, the notion of group, which is a lot of courses do that. In order to help people with abstraction and also see how in mathematical, in terms of mathematical structure, things are layered on top of each other, we started with a very abstract notion, a very simple notion of a semi-group, okay? And then we went through the notion of monoids, and now we are in groups. And in particular, we are emphasizing on cyclic groups because we want to see the application of cyclic groups on, say, for example, cryptography in the case, like in the next session where I will talk about the Diffie, the application of it in the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol. And we will also focus on matrix groups at the end. In this case, the orthogonal group, the special orthogonal group in the real case, but in the complex case, the unitary group and the special unitary group. Why? Because these are actually prototypes of Lie groups that we will encounter in the Lie groups and the representation theory course. So this brings me to the upcoming course. So the first thing we will do after we finish the group theory, this crash course, this course 3, is to go through Lie groups and representation theory. And then our plan is, this is already being signed off by my company. We will have a virtual applied school on first with the quantum error correction. So to see how these guys are applied in quantum error correction and also in quantum machine learning. Okay. So we learned the abstraction, and the idea is to go and get some real applied use cases of the mathematical machinery that the community went through with. Okay. So for those of you in the audience who haven't joined us, if you are interested in this, certainly, if you already, a little bit more advanced, but nevertheless, you want to refresh on Lie groups representation and also want to take anything to do with the quantum error correction, please feel free to join. Just make sure that you have the baseline mathematics covered, because otherwise you will certainly struggle. And then this is other courses that we have. So this, we might have, this is just what's upcoming quantumformalism.com. There is another one that haven't been signed off yet. We will have on measure theory and functional analysis. I didn't add this year, but we'll have that too. And one thing I want to comment is so far we've been doing things sequentially, like, course after course. But at some point this year, we'll start having parallel stuff because I'm actually in the process of hiring some postdocs, some mathematicians to come in and helping deliver some of the courses. So they are done in parallel. And one of the initiatives is this course that we will do. You are also most welcome to join, which is a course on category theory for computer scientists. We'll also have a course on algebraic topology and topological data analysis. And then we'll have a course on homotopy type theory and formal verification. So really some very, very, very interesting integrated courses that we will start doing because we learned a lot from the quantum formalism, especially the first 2 courses gave us a lot of insights into how best to get to get our aim of exposing people and making them use the mathematical machinery stuff. Is not just giving them the mathematics. Yeah, it's actually having some sort of integrated course. This is certainly something that we look forward to. We also have something planned for cryptography also. So there's a lot of initiatives. Please feel free to connect with us on social network, follow us, and these things. So you get updated on these parallel courses that will happen, not just specific to quantumformalism.com community. Another thing before I open up for Q&As, I will give some tips. I called it abstraction learning tips. Okay, these are like you can this is just an opinion. Okay, you don't need to take it from me. You can maybe ask the panelists also what they think about this. So, but my advice when you are new to learning, or if you find it hard to get into the abstraction, the first thing is actually abstract it. take what I call, take the abstraction pill. By this I mean, for example, a lot of you coming from like software engineering background, or like say modern developers, for instance. Nowadays, if you want to learn a new stack, you go to the developer documentation. You see the docs, you see sample code, examples. You play around with them and these things. What I want you to challenge you with is to the other way around. When you see a mathematical abstraction, the first thing that comes to your mind is not, oh, can I see an example, for instance? Okay. The first thing that you should put your mind into is, what can I do with this abstraction? What can I prove? So this is the best way. This is the best way that you have in order to feel comfortable with the abstraction. Another thing is take one step at a time approach to abstract concept, because these things are built on, they are layered on top of each other. If you struggle with one concept, abstract concept, that something else that you want to learn is relying on, you will not be able to really have a proper grasp of the stuff at the higher without really having the fundamentals of the stuff, the abstract stuff underpinning it. So that's why you need to take your time. Take one step at a time. If you have difficulties, try to build your own intuition of the abstract concepts, okay? And also try to do proofs by yourself before checking other people's proof. It's very easy to say, what, I'll just search somebody else, because this is what, especially people coming from, in modern software development world, right? You come across a problem, you go to Stack Exchange to try to see whether someone else has a solution. So you can, because there's no time, you need to find something. But with this type of stuff, you need to try to do it yourself. So you can internalize with the stuff before you check other people's solution. Okay. And another thing is, if you struggle to understand an abstract concept, just cross-reference. Sometimes this happens a lot in mathematics. This one abstract notion can be defined so many different ways. So there are different ways of getting into it. Okay, so just cross-reference. Don't feel frustrated. Just cross-reference with different sources. Try set up a study group too, where you can present your proof to others, and where you can also, ask any other, questions and tend to. So I found it very, very useful, really, to have some sort of someone, even it's just one extra person who is interested in the same thing as you, set up, because it makes it much more easier for you. Yeah. Another thing is, whenever you feel frustrated with abstraction, remember, this is a very interesting quote. Mathematicians are like Frenchmen. Whenever you say something to them, they translate it into their own language, and it becomes something completely different. And this is true. You will see that very often, a lot of the stuff, like, even in, we learn how to do like, we know, like, for example, like, 1 plus 0 in Z is like 1 plus 0 is 1. We know that. Okay, so mathematician will say, okay, this is happening because 0 is the additive identity of the integers and these things. So this is just I'm giving this story.
By the way, I just wanted to say thank you for this slide, and that's exactly. I mean, I think this slide covers some of the stuff I was saying. So yeah, this is wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. So yeah, don't feel frustrated. And it's actually a long term for anything you want. One thing that I found very useful is to learn things based on your needs. Okay. So that's the best way, because then you have a motivation to do it. If you do things just because okay, I want to learn it, or because someone else said to you that you want to learn, or you need to learn it, it becomes a little bit more of a less incentivizing for you to go through the difficulties, but try to see your objective, structure it. I mean, mathematics is such a massive field. In fact, I know, I'm pretty sure a lot of you will know, it's very hard nowadays. There is no universalist. People used to say that Poincaré was the last universalist in the sense of being able to work in different branches of mathematics. Nowadays, in modern mathematics, it's so specialized. A mathematician working in something, in one particular field doesn't necessarily, know what someone else in another field does. Obviously there have been some interesting unification programs, something like the Lagrange program, and they're trying to bridge the gap between different fields of mathematics and these things. But still, it's very, just to feel, to encourage you, even mathematicians, the field is so massive, so don't feel frustrated. It's just, you need to know, first of all, why you need it, and, you need to have some sort of a motivation in order to see it through. And when it happens, you really like, you will have like, I think you will have like superpowers, It must, for those of you looking for career, especially those of you starting now, it will give you definitely, extra points, when it comes to talent, when people looking for talented people in STEM related jobs. Okay. In fact, I recommend you, I forgot to put this, there was one article that recently came in on Quanta, you can search it, making the case why programmers need to learn more mathematics. Okay. So with that, I just want to say thank you before I take questions and open up for possible discussion. Before I know we have a panel too, but feel free to visit us, our repository on GitHub, YouTube channel. Definitely subscribe if you want to get notified with the other playlists that we will put there. Certainly follow us on social media if you want to stay in touch with the latest updates. And with that, I will stop sharing. And I will take any question. In fact, I will leave the slide just in case I will leave it for 5 minutes in case any question came in relation to anything that I went through with. Okay, so thank you so much. And I'm ready for any questions before we go to the panel. I call some of the community members.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Bombardier. All right, so let's open.
Anyone wants to make a point?
Yes, Q&A session. There's a question on YouTube. Is there a way to start from the beginning with the courses already completed?
Yes, we do have them on the thing on YouTube. Yeah, though it might be very boring. If you are, certainly, I would say, if you are getting really, depending on where you are starting. If you are really from the beginning, maybe take the foundation module first. I think we have like 20 sessions or 18, something like that. So yeah. And they are short. That's the thing. The key of it is that they are very, very short. Yeah, and they are free. Yeah, they are all free. They're available. Yeah, we are not charging for any access to anything. Yeah. The reason, by the way, the reason we do this. Yeah. Someone is asking, can you provide? You mean Cynthia is asking, can you provide a foundation? You mean the link? Yeah, it's on our YouTube playlist. Go to my company's thing and then go to the playlist. You will see something called foundation module, and that's it. If you are really getting started. Yes, so another question is, do you have a group forum to discuss the topics? Yes, we do have a Discord channel. I think the thing is on the slides. Am I still sharing the slides?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Yeah. So if you look at the thing, you go to the Discord, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm there on Discord. Yeah, not as active as I would, because also it's partly tactical, because I want people to interact with each other. So if they have a question, to like think someone else to try to help them before I come in. Yeah.
Jose has raised his hand. So Jose, would you like to unmute yourself and ask question?
Of course.
Yes. Yeah, I have a question related with C algebras, because I know that is, of course, on the foundations of quantum mechanics, but I'm not sure in what is the exact framework that it's appropriate to include C star algebras. So do you cover in one of the courses that you have mentioned C star algebras?
Yeah, we haven't covered C-star algebras yet because we need a bit of functional analysis for that. But we do have we do have the opportunity to do at least the finite dimensional cases, because the complex matrices, n by n matrices, they are actually a good example of that, right? But we want to do it when we have the functional analysis stuff, or in more general, we'll talk about operator algebras, these type of things, and they become very useful in the there's something called the density matrix formalism of quantum mechanics. So I believe on the thing, this is where you actually behind scenes, all these stuff actually is the machinery of C-star algebra is what's happening there.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, and also another thing, another reason you want to learn them is that we will be like at some point we have some, because one of the things is not just people interested in quantum computing. We do have physicists coming in, and one of the few people kind of convinced me. I also thought it's very interesting to have at some point a course on non-commutative geometry. So you certainly need C-star. You need functional analysis, and you need on top of that you need
so you
C-star stuff in order. Yeah. Before
that's the work of Yang LeCong, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Previously there was a question from Antonio. So could be intuition related with abstraction in some way?
That's a very that's a very could be intuition related to abstraction. I mean, a lot of these looking obviously before the whole thing of abstract, say for example, abstract algebra, and these things came around before we start in the era of abstraction. A lot of these stuff are built actually out of simple stuff that we learn when we are like in kindergarten school, right? We learn how to add things, numbers, right? We know that like 1 plus 1 0 is 1. You know that 0 plus 0 is 0. This type of stuff. We know that 1 times any number, is any number is that number. So all this has been abstracted into structures. We have the notions of identity. We have the notions of things that inverses, things that building blocks for us to build these abstractions that obviously open up the door for us to explore even more exotic stuff. And in the case of physics, this is very interesting because I think quantum mechanics actually came at the right time because the abstractions were the mathematical machinery, people like von Neumann and all these, they already laid the foundation for it to in order for the field to advance. The same with general relativity in a sense, because the geometry, the differential geometry was already a little bit moving, a little bit more mature, a little bit more advanced than when it was getting started in Riemann's and Gauss's time. So to go back again, I know I'm like zigzagging. I would say actually it's the other way around. A lot of times it's like we build abstractions out of very intuitive notions in order to try to explore, new stuff. So so imagine we are in a forest, right? You try to build, get some intuition about a tree and these things, and then suddenly you realize that maybe, what if, that's the question. That's what if this, what if that? Yeah. So mathematicians are like that. You give them something, they try to generalize. Actually, there is a funny video of Feynman. I'll see if I can find it somewhere. Somehow I'm not able to exit the chat. A very interesting video of them about abstraction on a thing where is the video? I lost my the Zoom control. I need to find the Zoom first to come back to it because I don't see. Okay, I'm here. Okay, yeah. Where is it? Am I here? Yeah. So he was basically saying this thing of abstraction. He said he went to if you go to a mathematician asking him, I want, a space of 3 dimensions because of this, mathematicians will say, well, we can give you, something like, what about, let's say, a space of n dimensions and these things. And then so, no, I want 3 dimensions. He was like, the mathematician will say, okay, just substitute, just replace n, just put n equals 3, and then you have your case. So mathematicians like to work in generality. That's the thing. And so in essence, dealing with the forest, as opposed to dealing with the individual trees. Unless they are like very specific type of trees, you do that also. In the context of structures, you might have higher level structure, but then you might want to, narrow, your interest into one particular substructure of that bigger structure. Okay. I can see I'm a bit this thing here, the Zoom. Because I haven't used Zoom for some time. I'm losing. I know I'm on. You can see me. Does anyone have any question? Because I cannot see any more questions. I'm trying to come back to the normal window.
All right. Do we have any more questions on board there? So potentially you can unmute yourself. So maybe it will be easier if there are some questions, but currently I don't see more questions on our chat. Yes,
May I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Yes, sure.
Hi, thank you so much for this illuminating orientation. I have a specific question because if I may just say a couple of words about myself. I'm a technology marketer, but I've in recent months become excited about quantum and have decided to learn it at a technical level. I have a small technical background. Like my degrees are from the humanities, but I did learn a lot of math as a young man and worked as a software engineer at one point. So right now I've found Leonard Woody's book, Essential Mathematics for Quantum Computing. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I find it to be perfect for my level. I read it like a breeze, reviewing linear algebra and so on, and it builds up toward Hilbert spaces and so on. I wonder if you feel that having finished that at some point this summer, hopefully, I'm currently on page 160 out of maybe 300 pages. Would I be in a good position then to join your group, or do you feel that it's for people who are really technical and more advanced?
That's a good question. I'm not familiar with, I think I've heard this book, but I haven't checked through the content. But I believe once I call some of the community members, they should be able to direct you, give you some thing on that about, resources, where is the best starting point?
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe it's the time, actually, if there is no more question, I can see if any of the community members want to unmute themselves and introduce themselves, and we take it from there.
Thank you.
There
Is
is
there any
a question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is relating to comment in the chat by, I think the name is Saif Mustafa.
Yeah.
Because I have a very similar quibble with, on one hand, I admire your approach to introduce people to very high concepts in math, but the goal is not really the math. Math is a tool.
Yeah.
And therefore, complementing your approach, I would love to see, or the study groups will create one by one, practical pragmatic application in quantum computing and circuit designs that are using specific concept or theory in math. So in this way, you will bridge from the high level concepts, abstraction and all that, to something pragmatic, to Python tool, Python notebook, that one can design a circuit or a better circuit, or faster, whatever, using some elegance of the math, the specific chapter in math that was learned.
Yeah, this is certainly something that we want. That's why we are exposing, giving them, you're right, mathematics is a tool. That's why we want to give the tool to as many people as possible, and hopefully they become like creative and do things with it. In fact, this is a good way of mentioning something else I didn't cover, is that you can audit our courses, but if you want me to write a certificate for you, you need to prove me that you have applied the stuff that you learned. That's how the certification and saying the structure that we think, whether it's through an open source project, or in terms of contributing some code or something, or even coming up with design or anything. It could be a theoretical nature, but also on some sort of a practical nature.
So there are groups that look at articles and study them together, and then translating the concepts to software, open source or not open source software.
Yeah.
I think that will give good positive feedback to people who study math, because I'm looking at math for quite a long time, and the list of concepts or the courses that you describe have very, very high level and difficult math. C-star algebra is not trivial. Non-commutative geometry or algebraic geometry, they're amazing tools, but they're very powerful. And then if you delve so deep in them, you forget why you started. Okay?
Yeah, we certainly want people to know enough to be dangerous and then go and do things, but not to dive too much into the rabbit hole and not get out of it.
Well, it could be a black hole,
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is actually a good opportunity to start introducing some of the community members. I think Barry actually has raised his hand. I can see it from here. So Barry, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to give a counter argument here to what Tamar just said. I'm in the group. I've been attending it since the start in 2020. I'm a professor at a small liberal arts college in New Jersey in the United States. I'm not in it for the practical benefit. I'm in it because for me, it's a trip down memory lane for my mathematics education in undergraduate and graduate school. I studied some of the topics that Bombardier is going through, others I didn't. And every one of them I find fascinating. And while I am very interested in quantum computing, that's kind of how I originally found the course. I'm even writing an elementary book on it, very elementary. But I'm in it because, hey, I just love the stuff. And if I don't get to apply it, which is almost 100% going to be the case, I'm still enjoying the beauty of the structures. There's one theorem about manifolds that you mentioned in one course. I wasn't there during the session, but I watched the session afterwards. It just blew me away. 4-dimensional manifolds. Yeah, when you say it's just a tool, hey, wait a minute. We mathematicians, we take exception to that.
Well, it's the queen of sciences and servant of all.
If
I may.
Yeah. Thank you for the intervention, Barry. Please feel free again to come back. Now, before I know Stefano also raised his hand. He's also a member of the community member, and then someone was trying to speak. I haven't seen. Yeah, maybe Stefano, please go ahead. And then.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? First of all.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I'm a member of community, and I have to really thanks, because it's fantastic this approach and these things for free. My 2 cents is that I kind of disagree with calling mathematics a tool. I think software is more a tool. Let me give my background. My background is 25 years working as a computer engineer. I work also for a company like Microsoft, similar, and now I'm studying part-time mathematics at university, and I found this pretty interesting. In my experience in the field computer engineering is that a lot of time we try to, oh, let's just run to the tool because we have to produce something, and it's almost always failed. If you see the history of software and computer engineering is full of things because we just rush. And I also think that the actual approach is my opinion, and please take it with like that. To quantum computing is too early and is pretty faulty. This hybrid approach, this way to just doing because we need in the industry, because instead there is no investment in try to do better algorithm and better mathematics, because it's very difficult to find people that instead has the background to do that, to create better model and better approach. And I saw now where I'm working, that we work with very huge data. There is a very huge need for people with a better background, a better theoretical background, because we need a lot of step back to rewrite most of the code that we wrote maybe a little bit on a rush because we need it. And I found challenging the approach that Bombardin proposed, but still very interesting. And I don't know, I personally like it, and I'm happy and thanks to be in this community. That would be my 2 cents.
Yes, thank you, Stefan, for adding. I just want to add something else into this. You said something very interesting. In the case of machine learning, for instance, we are seeing all these abstracts, frameworks like TensorFlow, PyTorch, people using it, to build models and everything. But without having that, understanding of that mathematical thing of the underpinning stuff, it's really very hard. It's like you are just, you're just doing things blindly. It's very hard to understand, when things go wrong, for instance, So
precisely, and also exactly in my work, we are moving towards streaming machine learning that is completely different from the typical machine learning, typical pipeline batch based. And almost all the machine learning data science has to be rewritten, not to mention graph machine learning and all these projects. These were really like a mathematician, physicist with a very strong theoretical background comes in, and we have a very short on this approach. And so I'm really looking forward to see what is quantum machine learning, because I have really no freaking idea. And I think we will need even more of this formalism and this theoretical background that we actually don't have.
Thank you. So I saw George praised. Was there someone else? Pawel, please feel free to. If
yes,
there is anyone.
Okay. I think that George was first. So George, please go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, I wasn't sure how to join the panel. I had been invited, but I just want to raise my hand. So yeah, first a little about myself. I'm a retired software engineer, but I did study pure mathematics 40 years ago. But back then it was a very discouraging environment. And aside from the areas where I already had intuition, particularly in geometry, I was not encouraged. In geometry, I was eventually doing differential geometry and topology at an advanced level. But in the abstract algebra courses, this was kind of thrown at me in the way that's being criticized. No motivation whatsoever. This is the definition of a ring. This is the definition of an ideal, and so forth. And I really struggled there. So I want to first of all thank Bamborde for reawakening my interest in these, and also for helping me realize that I wasn't dumb, that I could learn these actually more abstract algebraic concepts and begin to develop an intuition for them. So yeah, I have some thoughts on some of the questions that came up, but I don't want to monopolize the panel.
No, feel free to add, and then we move to the next person.
Okay.
While it's fresh.
Okay, I'll start with the most general of intuition and abstraction and proof. These are not new ideas. These go back thousands of years. Back before the ancient Greeks, even the Egyptians, and I'm not sure about which civilization in the Middle East. I think the Babylonian, there are some tablets, were actually going more abstract and proving things like the Pythagorean theorem. And then the Greeks to give the Greeks the credit, they took abstraction to that next level, but it was already there. And I think something that's gone a bit wrong in education in general, as I don't know about in other countries, but it seems to me that math has become totally watered down, so people don't learn elementary geometry, and in the sense of Euclid, where you learn not just the geometric facts, but how to prove them from simpler geometric facts. But my point was that these simpler facts are what mathematicians call axioms, and they are distilled from experience at some level. So like in geometry, a point is the abstraction of this idea of a location, that there doesn't need to be something there for that to be a location. And I don't want to go into the details of that, but Bambordi already mentioned like the number 0, that if you add it to any other number, it gives you the same number back. And so if you actually learn arithmetic either by writing it on paper or by using an abacus or number rods or anything except punching it into a calculator and getting the answer back, you begin to develop some basic algebraic intuition. So yeah, sorry to rant a bit on there, but the point I'm trying to make is that all of these abstractions are layered on and the beginning layer is concrete experience, and that you build an intuition. I mean, the simplest example of numbers is that you experience that I have 2 apples and 3 apples. I add them together, I get, I'm probably going to get this wrong, 5 apples. And amazingly enough, if I have 2 oranges and 3 oranges, I add them together, I get 3 oranges. So at that point, 2 and 3 and addition are already these abstractions.
But then when you start thinking about minus, what does minus 3 apples plus
Yes, that's where it gets interesting.
Minus 3 apples, minus 3 apples.
And this is historically the case, that negative numbers and 0 came late in the development. So these are not obvious, but at some point somebody, and you had hinted at this earlier, that what mathematicians ask is what if? And the formal methods, the axiomatic methods, you work with the abstractions and then you say, what if? And then in terms of those abstractions, you can find a result that isn't obvious, but you do then have to translate that back into the real world. So if you say there's such a thing like a 0, a skeptic might ask you, well, show me 0 oranges. And that's not obvious. It's an abstraction from there being no oranges in this basket. And then you might have worked out that if I take oranges out of the basket, that's a different operation than putting oranges in the basket. So then maybe you have the notion that putting an orange in the basket is adding, and we need a name for this abstraction of take an orange out of the basket, we call that abstraction. And we work out some consequences of this. And then we can say, okay, we have this abstract concept of -3, even though there really isn't such a thing as -3 oranges. I think one of my points is we forget that some of the abstractions that we've totally internalized really are abstractions and not real. And people get maybe shocked when you talk about the square root of -1 or a Hilbert space or a C-star algebra and say, well, that's crazy, that doesn't exist. But my contention is that these exist no more and no less than the number 2 or the number -1. And that, as Bamborde mentioned, the higher level abstractions are built on layers on top of the basic abstractions. And that one just needs to have some kind of semi-advanced course. This used to be in high school back in my day. They taught set theory and elementary logic and elementary probability and calculus in high school. If that's not the case, then maybe a first semester of college is a prerequisite, but that doesn't have to be the case. I think the foundation module that Bamborde mentioned, those concepts should be accessible to anybody.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the intervention, George. I'm not, before I call Bob, because Bob is a part of the community, Bob, can I call this Amar Hussein first? He might have a question or something, a point. Then I will come back to Bob, please.
No problem.
Yeah, I was going to say that because there was a comment about math as tool and software as tool, that would be a perfect time to say that there is the Curry-Howard-Lambeck correspondence. And so say you were talking about a software that would produce for you some better circuit. Then for you to know that that is actually what it's doing, you would be doing a proof, and you would be doing you would have the same level of abstraction if you were to actually know that it was a correct program. And so they're actually the same thing.
I hear like some static noise. I didn't get the last part. You were saying, so I don't know whether it might be my case actually. Maybe I think the battery is running low. I need to charge this.
No, there is somebody that's not muted. So.
Yeah. So maybe I'll call. So thank you, Amar, for making for your point. Maybe I'll call Bob. Bob Miller, please.
Sure. I myself, like George, like Barry, like Stefan, like Amir, are a member of the quantum formalism group. Love the class. I think Bamborde has done a wonderful job in the way he presents the material, and he presents just enough to get you thinking about it, which is very important. Real briefly, a little bit about my background. I'm semi-retired. My background is in earth sciences, mathematics, and software development. And I've made a career with those three, combining them. I want to make a couple comments. One about abstraction. In my career, one of the things I found is if you really understand a concept in terms of its abstraction, it makes it so much easier to move that technique to another application. I see a lot of guys in my profession that say, I just want to learn enough to solve the problem I'm looking at right now. What's the formula? Yeah. Not really understanding all the intricacies. But if you understand the abstraction, then that same formula you're applying to a geophysics problem could be applied to a operations management problem or to balancing a portfolio or whatever. So that's the first comment. The second comment is, one way you develop intuition is to take a look at the concept, understand the abstraction, maybe look at a concrete example. And then, and we do this all the time in our study group, you say to yourself, how can I break this? What are the extreme cases? Where doesn't this work? It's easy to look and say, oh, okay, I see where it works, and then move on. But when you really understand when things fall apart, it tells you a lot more about what you're looking at. And the more failures you have, the more intuition you develop. That was basically what I wanted to say. So I'm going to go off.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bob. And it's great to have you in the community, and you and George for the organization of the study sessions. Did anyone else had raised the hand? Is there anyone else from the community that wants to please raise your hand so I can see you, because I have a limited thing because of the screen.
I can add to the last comment by asking, if it works, why did it work? If it did not work, why it did not work? So just to add to the last comment.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, when you say community, does that mean your community, you have a specific group of people, or are we talking about the Washington Computer Society?
Oh, you mean me?
Yeah, you mentioned that there are certain people in the community, and there was
in the
somebody
quantum formalism, the people who have already been with us. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
that's what I
all
meant.
right. So you got a bunch of people who are from that community. Okay, understood.
Yeah, they are here. Some of them, Amir, thank you for thing on the chat, are active in the chat. At join because of the environment, it could be very noisy and this thing, but thank you. Join also, if you want to join, anybody who is able, please just raise your hand so we can see you.
So
anyone else?
Even though I'm not part of the community, I just wanted to say a few things, but only after you have exhausted your community members, I can go there.
Oh no, you can give your point. It's just if I see one of them raise hand, I'll go to them just to.
No, please go ahead to them, and then I can come.
Actually, yeah. What would be interesting is to ask them about the approach or anyway. I leave it like open. Feel free, please.
Ben Borda, I actually had a question for you. I know it's, I'll use this as an opportunity to ask this question. I know I could ask you anytime, but since you presented today, what can you share briefly a little bit about what led you into abstract mathematics?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. It will lead us to Galois theory. So yeah. I actually have an interesting picture to share. Maybe it actually reminded me. I should have shared a little bit. Yeah, but I will start with the thing. So I was in high school. When I was in high school, I was, well, I won't say I was good at maths, as in high school sense, but it wasn't enough to motivate me to go and study mathematics. I was having good grades and these things, this type of stuff. But I remember, I think it was 9th grade or something, or 8th grade, whichever year where we we learn about polynomial equations. Yeah, so we're learning like the 2nd degree polynomial equations, and we learn the quadratic equation, right? We learn how to solve it, yeah. And then the teacher, actually, this is where teachers are very fundamental instigating, interest in these type of things. So the teacher made a side comment. I was lucky because the teacher actually was someone who she had a PhD in maths, but couldn't find a job in academia. So she ended up being, teaching at school stuff. Yeah, and she was also actually coming from algebraic geometry. that's her PhD. So she, as a side comment, she was very obviously excited when she taught us how to, solve the quadratic equation. She was like, "Have you guys thought about, the cubic as well?" So we went through. she actually, even though that was at the time that was very very advanced, but she was like, for those of you who are interested, you can, I'm happy to take a few hours here and these things to go through some other interesting. So we essentially in school we have like some like a group session of the, I call them the curious, including myself. So yeah, so when she went through like the cubic, then the quartic, and then she introduced the notion of, the problem that, for example, there isn't a general formula for solving the kinetic equations or polynomials or equations of a degree greater or equals to 5 in general cannot be solved using the radicals, the process of radicals. In fact, we covered this in the foundation module, in the current group crash course. I think I covered in not last session, the session before, wasn't it? I think, yeah. So anyway, I was fascinated by it, that such a problem, something that I could understand. First of all, I could understand the problem, and then that the problem wasn't, it was like a negative answer. But then gradually she kind of, over the weeks that we were having these side sessions, she introduced essentially Galois theory to us. So I was very, very, very thankful about, Galois. The fact that, also he was like a bit of a rebel, he died very young. All that made me a little bit fascinating. So my thing to mathematics, that's what really made me my initial interest into abstract mathematics was through Galois theory, really, through the story. Not so much about the field. I had no clue about. Later I studied it, but at the time I understood enough to gain my interest. And later at university, actually, that this is another question I will ask. You probably want is why I'm interested in quantum. So actually, quantum mechanics, I became interested because there was a colleague, physicist, and he was struggling with functional analysis. So I was helping, giving him as much as help as I could because I was interested in the topic. And then one day he comes into canteen saying, hugging me and saying, "Thank you. I could prove the uncertainty principle and these things." I was like, "What do you mean?" And then it turns out that the notions, stuff like simple fact about like the canonical commutation relation, the non-commutativity of operators, has a huge impact in physics. That was like a very awakening thing for me to be like have some sort of interest into the apply side of things. So yeah. It probably didn't answer your full question, but yeah. Long story short, is Galois theory was because of Galois theory. Well, I didn't know it was Galois theory back then until she think that's group theory essentially was my pathway to get into this thing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I remember you mentioned you've mentioned Galois theory both in the foundations and the group theory course, but I didn't know that was kind of an impetus for your interest. That's cool. Yeah. So it wasn't like a number theory, or I like doing numbers and all this stuff, calculating. In fact, doing calculations was, I always like
I found it always boring to do like a concrete calculations, like you know, at school. I needed it was like it's good to go through them and you know, do the stuff, because you know, it provides the foundation for you to be able, you know, when the abstraction came later, you understood the stuff. You could justify why, you know, certain formulas worked or why they didn't work, and these things. This is where someone, like, I don't remember who said that. Actually, at university level, in the school, it's very hard to get the term, because it's like you are taking, you know, you are just being, you know, you are taking things for granted, you know. So when you go to the university, when you start to have access to university level stuff, certainly when you go through mathematics, you know, to see that, you know, some of the stuff that, you know, they taught you, they just gave you a formula. Actually, there is some sort of underpinning foundation behind it. So I found that very, very fascinating. Yeah.
All right. Do we have any more questions or comments?
There was something else I wanted to
I would
share.
like to,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, there was a speaker just who came in the middle. They wanted to say something. You said you wanted to share something. Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, after. No worries. You can go ahead. Yeah.
So basically, I wanted to go back to our earlier discussion on intuition, speculation, abstraction, and all that, right? And, you know, a lot of people in the group came out with some really good, beautiful, you know, analogy and everything on that. But then, you know, let me start by a bit of an anecdote from, you know, this Fibonacci series, right? We all know Fibonacci. Now, what happens was Fibonacci, we know that was published by Fibonacci in, I think, around 1202 book, Liber Abaci. And the funny thing is that Liber Abaci is a book, and when it came out, people thought that they're talking about, because liber in Italian, it means liberation. Yeah, Abaci is the abacus, right? And, you know, people thought that what Fibonacci is referring to is the liberation of the computer, that we need to move from what computer we have, and we need to move a new type of computer, right? Because abacus was the first computer. But that was not to be, because what Liber Abaci or Fibonacci in that series was essentially trying to say was, let's liberate our mind. Yeah, liberation of the abacus, liberation of how we do mathematics. Because if you look at the Roman numeral system, was from, you know, it goes from 1 all the way, but it has no concept of 0, right? Between any 2 points, you have an infinite number of points. Now, when we write the symbol of infinity, what we're trying to do is we're trying to abstract that's such a big number of steps into an abstraction of infinity. What is abstraction? Abstraction is basically you're simplifying a very large body of things into something that's abstracted into a high level principle. But then what about intuition? When intuition is the one that actually connects us from this, you know, it really plays an important role in recording of an experience as an act of observation. And what we're observing, somebody asked in the chat, hey, iota is considered an imaginary number, is because it's called an imaginary number because the senses we have do not perceive. Yes, 2 oranges is real. Yeah, what is imaginary? What is minus? If you read the quantum field theory, for example, even when everything is taken out, every single gas particle is taken out from a closed space, you actually find, even in that vacuum, there is this quantum fluctuating theory, which is defined by a particular equation. So when I say about intuition, intuition is that foresight to connect different parts of things that together gives you, and this is where I'm coming to Barry, he said something, and what Itamar also, then there was a bit of, you know, argument over there, is that intuition helps you connect the dots and enjoy the beauty of mathematics, or describe everything in terms of, because mathematics is fractals, it's each of these individual numbers as well. But then it is also very beautiful, and that helps you to kind of enjoy what Barry defined. It's more than just a tool. But then mathematics is also a tool because it helps you to formalize certain ideas. It helps you to prove that X is X, and whether what I'm thinking is in terms of our definition of what our observable instruments are, going back to this imaginary and non-imaginary, if your instrument is incapable of observing the imaginary, then it will remain the imaginary, because Hilbert space is as real as anything else. But because our world started from Newtonian physics, we tend to believe that that is the only intuition we got, because some of the intuition which Amir was referring to, and I call it unwashed, is because what we are referring to is from the general body of knowledge or education we've been provided. But there is so much more to that. And our intuition tells us so, because we experience this in an everyday life. And therefore, mathematics is not only, a tool that helps us grow from A to B, but it's also a thing of beauty. And, sometimes when you're looking at the star in the whole universe, it's so beautiful to watch the sky. But hey, when somebody interrupts you in the middle and say, hey, that starlight is X plus Y equals, X plus I, and, then you're kind of scoping it into a mathematical formalism. And yes, at that point, it no longer remains a beauty, it becomes but you can actually get a better insight of what the description of the starlight is if you understand the bigger picture. And it's so much beautiful. It drives the motivation. Then you're not worried about a job next day, but everybody needs to feed anyway. But you are more worried about the science itself. And that makes it so exciting. So that's all what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the comment. George, you want to add anything? Because especially from historical concepts that our friend here was going through, is there anything you want to add?
I'd just like to on what Zoom caller just said. And I would like to point out that poetry and art and music are also abstractions. If you write a lovely poem about the stars, you may be evoking the beauty, but it's also an abstraction. It's not the stars themselves. It's not even your experience of the stars. It's a beautiful image expressed in words and rhymes. Or Van Gogh's Starry Night is this amazing image of all of these stars swirling around. It doesn't really look like what we ordinarily see, but Van Gogh is presenting to us his abstraction of what he saw in that moment. So I just wanted to say that although mathematics is a particular kind of abstraction, as Gora said, a particular language, it's not the only language, and we need to get a bit of facility in translating between the different languages.
Yes, I agree with you on that, and I will do some extra comment also on that. Obviously, most of us, we are all here coming from like a STEM background. There's been a lot of neglect, at least in some places where social sciences and art, literature, all these things have been neglected. Huge amount of funding going through, and we are not seeing the next the people in these other fields, being supported as I think they should, because I think we should keep these other things too. So that's just an extra comment. They are as much as important as thing for the evolution of society, not just STEM STEM. So there should be more opportunity for other fields, whether in literature you talk about poetry and these things.
And by the way, I'd just like to add a little bit more thing there with regards to the comment that George just made, with regards to going back to the Fibonacci. Now, Fibonacci's book came out in 1202 or something like that. But Fibonacci, when he was a kid, when he was traveling in India, he met a guy called Hemachandra. And Hemachandra was basically a guy reciting these poems in a school. And essentially, the funny thing is, at that time, Fibonacci was so impressed because what happened, there was an incident when Hemachandra is asking his students, hey, this is so everybody knows what a Fibonacci series is the sum of the last and one before last is the number, right? So basically he creates a poem and then he asks a student, so what would be the next sequence of that? And the students intuitively, just straight away, without thinking, without calculating, intuitively just gives the answer. And the Fibonacci was so impressed at that time. This is, that he actually writes in his book, Liber Baci, that how he got the motivation for it. But the thing is, this demonstrates two things. One is that, that Fibonacci was very commonplace, part of the intuitiveness of some cultures long before it came to, to the formalism of European mathematics. But it also shows that mathematics itself is based on the ideas which are intuitive in nature, which are then given formalism, including poetry or sound or even arts. Fractals themselves are, are mathematical things.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for adding this point of discussion. It's I mean, we could go on forever. It's a very fascinating thing about, yeah. Does anyone wants to make any thing? I think we have 20 minutes. Everything. Who wants to intervene? Wants to do? I have something I would like to share right before we finish. Just one thing, one slide. I forgot to add it into the main slide, but maybe I'll share it. Maybe it might generate another point of discussion.
Okay. Yeah, but more, I think you can share it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you see this picture?
Great. We can see it. Yeah.
So that's me. I won't say which year, so you don't extrapolate my age. But I think the background will tell it. Yeah, so that's me as a young student, and I was interested in I used to be part of another group. There was a professor, a number theorist, who used to get us together to try to solve some of the RAS challenges, the factoring challenges that they used to release for pricing. Obviously, we were doing it just for fun, right? Yeah. During this time, at some point, there was someone in the department that was interested in quantum computation. So he gave him to give a talk on the thing, on the Shor's algorithm and these things. This was like, many years ago. And we were all like actually very, very fascinated. And there were physicists on the audience, very, very skeptical, obviously, saying like, okay, yeah, this is beautiful. And, okay, yeah, saying, but how do you actually engineer these things, And for me, it's fascinating that, years later, in principle, these machines, I mean, I haven't gone to these labs to see actually them, but I believe they've been, even though they are at toy stage, they've been built. They have been built, So it's a very nascent. I'm just trying to give some sort of thing to give you some motivation to say like, this is a very fascinating field. It's at a very early stages. Obviously we don't have the machine that can do some of the algorithms that promise us the computational advantage that proves us the worthiness of them. But some people are suggesting, even with the existing, even before we have a fault-tolerant quantum computer, even the existing NISQ devices, we should be able to do something, But the problem is, we haven't really seen that much of a thing of interesting use cases or algorithms out there that are able to do really groundbreaking stuff on existing NISQ devices. So there's an opportunity, for people, and I believe, frankly, that mathematics is the key for us if we are to, whether bridge the gap from, the NISQ era where we are to when we get to fault tolerance in terms of finding useful algorithms. Mathematics will play a very, very important role in that. So I really encourage you, especially those of you from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of ages, because I actually think there's this misconception, thinking that this field will be like, traditional tech, like someone like an 18 years old will just go there and, play around with code and generate something. I actually think we're not going to be there. If anything, I think we need more people, who are mature, more experienced professionals from other fields, give them the opportunity to upskill themselves. Maybe they will come with use cases, use cases that, are interesting enough, that give us some non-trivial stuff. Okay. So I really encourage everyone, mathematics is probably your pathway into it, is best shot if you are coming from a technical background. You equip yourself with it, and maybe who knows, you will be the next one to create the next algorithm, the next useful algorithm that no one else could come up with, because of your unique set of experience, your unique background. So that's all I wanted to add, and I will stop sharing.
All right, great. Do we have any more questions or comments to Van Borde? I see that George has raised his hand. For George, maybe some last remarks.
Yeah, George, please.
Yes, I'd like to just say a little more about the study sessions. Part of my inspiration for helping out with them, I forget the exact quote, but it's again from Richard Feynman. And the general gist of it is that if you cannot explain your idea to a freshman, you don't really understand it. So my personal motivation for helping with the study sessions is to really learn to the point where I can explain it to somebody else in the group. But I want to turn that on its head and say that can be part of everybody's learning process. If you just are in grade school and you do a presentation in the playground, oh, this is the way I can make a yo-yo do a trick. You are both practicing to learn this trick, but you are also explaining it, showing it to somebody else that they can do the trick. And at that point, you are a grand master of that yo-yo trick. And part of what I had to get over is the intimidation factor that many math, and especially in college, but also in books, math is presented in this beautiful finished product state. The mathematician stands at the blackboard and in beautiful handwriting does the equations one after another. And at the end of the board, there's the perfect proof. And that is a beautiful thing. But before he could get up there and do that, an awful lot of work went in. And there are different styles. The analogy I would make is to music. If you compare Mozart and Beethoven, if you look at a Mozart manuscript, it's perfectly calligraphy. The music notation itself is a thing of beauty. And the way Mozart put it would be, I heard it and all I had to do was write it down. Or the mathematical analogy would be the Indian mathematician Ramanujan. He'd end up with some crazy, beautiful formula about numbers and put it down there, and people would say, oh, wow. But Ramanujan's only explanation was that a goddess told this to him. Whereas other mathematicians have to work at the blackboard or on a sheet of paper, writing it down, erasing it, making mistakes, struggling with it until you push through to the beautiful formula. And again, the musical analogy would be Beethoven. You look at a Beethoven music manuscripts, it's a total mess of scribblings and ink blots and crossing out. But the net result is as beautiful a symphony of anything of Mozart's. So part of what I had to do was get the courage to, just at least in front of a small group, get up there and make a fool out of myself. I say, oh, I think I've solved this challenge, and I start working it out. And somebody else says, wait a minute, George, that's not right. And I say, oh yes, I screwed up. I have to backtrack, make an ink blot, erase that and start over. So it takes a certain amount of courage to do that. But I encourage everybody to have more courage to learn. And what I want to emphasize is that you cannot do that just by listening to the lecture, unless you're this total genius that entirely remembers the lecture or visualizes the equation from the chalkboard and so forth. And there are people like that. I believe von Neumann was one. But for the rest of us, we have to take our notes or the slides and then actually work on the problem. And then when you work on the problem, then you begin to see, that's what he was getting at. And to solve this problem, I need to use this idea from 3 slides back in the notes and so forth. But you have to struggle with it. You have to engage it. To use the software analogy, you have to learn the algorithm and write your own program. It's not enough to click on an icon and download a container that has a pre-built solution to your problem. If you do that, you know nothing. But if you struggle even with the littlest problems, you build your muscles a bit.
No, I agree. And I would add the analogy of a programmer, the more you program, the better you become. So in anything, the more you practice, you become better at it. Certainly in mathematics, it's the same thing. Yeah, someone has raised the hand. Our Zoom caller. Yep, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I also wanted to, right now, since we are discussing, wanted to point out about a story I read about Ramanujan as he was dying of cancer in his bed. The professor who was looking after him, I can't remember his name, he comes to visit him and he asks him,
Geoffrey Hardy, I believe, from Cambridge.
He asks him, what is the number of your car? What is the number plate? And he looks at that, and within seconds, just before his death, he actually tells him that this number exists in so many combinations, and it's a prime number that exists in that domain. And he was able to do that without, even when he was dying, when he was in cancer, sick on his bed. That's the power of intuition, And sometimes people, they can see things through intuition, this foresight that help. And again, as rightly said, that takes time. That is beyond, these symbols or how, most people, for example, do not know that sine theta, the word sine is referring to a sinusoidal wave. You can actually visualize it on a frequency generator. You can view as sinusoidal waves. It's an abstraction of the sinusoidal wave. So this I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you for commenting on the thing, Ramanujan thing. George, did you have, I think the professor is Geoffrey Hardy, I think. He was a number theorist, one of the greatest. Actually, he's, most of you probably know, this is just a side note. He's one of the number theorists who wrote a story saying that he wrote a book called A Mathematician's Apology or something, that his work was never going to be useful in anything, something like that. And then a few years later, number theory has a lot of application in cryptography. Yeah, so I think George or Bob.
My hand never got lowered
okay.
up to my last.
Okay,
Do
so
I lower
Bob,
the
please
hand?
go ahead.
But I'm always willing to talk more. That's my weakness. Yes, there's another great Hardy Ramanujan story where this might be connected with the visits in the hospital. And Hardy says, and I'm going to get the number wrong, I used to have this remembered, that, the cab I rode in on seemed to be just not a special number, 1437 or something. And Ramanujan immediately piped up and said, oh no, that's a very special number. It's the lowest number that is the sum of 2 cubes in 2 different ways. So Ramanujan could instantly see any number and see what was special about it.
Yeah, Bob, that's the thing. Bob, you wanted to add something else before I comment?
Yeah, I just want to digress a little bit from not Ramanujan, who was a great mathematician and man I admire. Talk a little bit about the value of your course. The quantum formalism course, the way I see it, actually had 3 different values. First two we talked a little bit about, the third one we haven't. First one is just the beauty of the mathematics. And some people may not appreciate that, other people do. Second is the applications to quantum computing, which was the whole point of it. But the third is the mathematics you've been going over is applicable to a lot of different fields. Since, you and I, Bamboudi, have talked about this, but since I've started taking your course to the topology and then the group theory, I've actually developed several applications that have nothing to do with quantum computing. And it was just a matter of knowing that this, and I'd never be able to apply the mathematics to another area if I didn't know the mathematics existed in the first place. And I see that as the third value of the quantum formalism courses. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the words, Bob. And actually, we look forward to having Bob. Bob will be doing a presentation about group theory. So I will be doing, obviously, during the crash course, in the existing group theory crash course, the application of group theory to cryptography. In this case, we'll just narrowly focus on the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol. But Bob, I believe Bob wants to do another talk on the applications of group theory to something else. Yeah, so you are all welcome to join that his talk. We haven't scheduled it yet, so it will probably be sometimes next month. But please, if you subscribe to quantumformalism.com, you'll get a notification about Bob's talk, or just join the Discord as well. Yeah. So I think we are almost like on time, right on time. Of the original schedule. Pawel, maybe I hand over to you if you want to make any closing remarks.
Yes.
Unless someone has something to say.
Yes, I think it's time to finish. So at least I personally have to leave. But anyway, I believe that it was very interesting and fruitful first talk and then discussion. So thank you, Bamboudi, once again, first for the talk and also for leading the discussion. And we would also like to thank everyone for attending. We hope to see you on our next meetups that we advertised at the beginning. And I think that's all. So enjoy. Have a good week ahead, and hope to see you next time on our next meetups. Thanks, Bamboudi, once again.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.